Welcome to the 340 Education Administration Full Committee, Wednesday afternoon, members. As we begin, let's begin by calling the roll. Madam Clerk?
Representative Baum, Carringer, Cassada, Sapicki, Clemens, Cochran, Darby, Gillespie, Hakeem, Haston, Lafferty, Love, Parkinson, Reagan, Vice Chairman Hurt, Chairman White.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Members, as we've always begin our committee, I always like to begin, since we are legislating for the young people in our state, let's bow our heads for a prayer. I'm going to ask our resident pastor, Representative Love, to lead us in a prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let us pray. Gracious God, we indeed thank you for this day's rising up and going out. We thank you, God, for allowing those who have traveled in to have safe passage here. Bless us, oh God, as we deliberate issues, that our hearts and minds may open, our ears may be receptive, and that decisions would be beneficial for the people of this state. It's our prayer in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Members, anyone have any recognitions or announcements or comments you want to make before we begin going down? Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to recognize my intern, Ms. Shelby Batson. Please stand up, Shelby. She's been following me today.
Thank you. Anyone else want to seek recognition? Okay, members, what we're going to do, I want to jump around a little bit here, not only for those, raise your hand if you're in here carrying the bill and you got to get to another committee. Representative Lamar, Representative Vaughn, you need to. Okay, let's start out with, since I always like to be respectful, Representative Lamar, come on to the podium. Members, we're on House Bill number 3, HB 1020.
Thank you, Chairman of Committee. I'm actually sitting on Criminal Justice Full, and it's going on right now. So I appreciate you all allowing me to go ahead and present to you all. House Bill 1020 is the amendment carrying with it.
Need a motion and second? We've already had a motion and second. You also have an amendment going with it, and your amendment is?
6227.
That rewrites the bill. We
Yes,
can go
sir.
ahead and add that to the bill and to have discussion. You got motion second. All those in favor of adding the amendment 6227 to the bill indicate by saying aye. Opposed? It's added, and you're now back on your bill is properly amended. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. What this bill simply does is allow schools to let students who are about to turn 18 years old before the election is to tell them that you are eligible to vote. It is not registering them to vote. It is just sending them either a sheet of paper, an email, or a letter in the mail telling them that you're eligible to vote. And the information about how to do this can only be obtained from your local county election commission or the Secretary of State. No outside groups can come in and give this information to the students, and it has no fiscal note, so it's not significant.
Okay, members, with that explanation, open up for discussion. Chairman Sapicki?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate Representative Potts and yourself bringing this bill to us. Had lengthy conversations with the Secretary of State. They've let me know that we already do this in our LEAs 3 times throughout the year with the Election Commission. Secretary of State does have oversight on this to make sure it's being done. And this is, if we do this, we're adding another layer on top of our LEAs. So at this time, I'd make a motion to general sub this.
The motion's been made. We have an objection. Do I have 3 hands on the committee? Okay, I do have 3. Okay, we'll now have a vote on the motion to general sub. All those that would support the motion, you would say aye, and those you don't say no. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, I will back up. I'll let you speak on it, but the motion has already been made and the motion's been killed.
This bill's gone.
Okay, Representative Love, you're recognized.
Just a question, Mr. Chair. For those who are watching, and for many of us now, I've been on the Education Committee for a few years, and I know this is a new thing for the House to have a bill general sub, and like to get some clarity on what the procedures are. For instance, does the sponsor of the bill have a chance to speak on the bill when objection, on the motion, when a objection is raised and we're about to vote? Or does general sub cut off debate the motion for that? I mean, because again, this is brand new for many of us. I know for me, it's brand new. And in a spirit of transparency for those who are watching and maybe wondering what the process is, again, on the House side, this is the first year I think we've done it. So if you could, Mr. Chairman, provide some
Sure.
clarity for us.
Yes, we can check that out. Traditionally, we had when a motion's been made and the motion's on the floor before all debates cut off. Now I would check on the whether or not the sponsor of the bill still has the ability to speak. But the motion was made and we voted on the motion. So that's where we're on this particular one. Chairman, Representative Parkinson.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And if the previous sponsor would just wait for a second, because we all need to understand this, because when did we start doing this? I've never.
General sub was this year.
Was this
I
year?
tell you, here's what we will do, committee. In an effort to be fair, members, I would like us to reconsider our actions. We will then come
Second.
back, we'll then come back to the motion at this point in time. Representative Lamar, come back to the podium. There's been a motion. Do I have a second to reconsider our actions? Okay, we have that. So now we're going to reconsider our actions and we're going to go back and we're going to start the beginning, and then we will have the motion that we made by Representative Pickey, and we will go through the process, but we will recognize Representative Lamar to speak.
And Mr. Chair, before you start the process again, just a point of order, just for clarity purposes. If a bill is general sub, how does it come out of general sub?
According to the rules that with this year, general sub, it does not. You can roll it to the next calendar. You can take it off notice, but once it's general sub, it's got to go back to the clerk to bring back out.
Chairman, is it that big of an issue?
Okay.
with the bill that-
We can get the clerk's office
Get it fixed?
in here to speak on that.
Chairman, come on.
Okay. Our actions have been reconsidered. Representative Lamar, you're recognized on House Bill 1020.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This general sub process is very new to all of us. So I appreciate you and my colleagues taking the time to explain. But I did wanted to respond to what Chairman Sapicki said and put it on the record that Secretary Hargett has not reached out to me or Potts about this particular piece of legislation. Chairman Sapicki did not reach out to me and say any of this prior to the committee hearing, and it does not. All it does is codify what you can do in practice. What we're simply doing is codifying the act of letting them know. It's free. It can be an email. It can be a sheet of paper at school. It's very simple. It's not even controversial. And the information is coming from the Secretary of State himself. So it's simply just codifying what some are doing in practice. And it costs no money. And if we want our students to be civically engaged, this is an opportunity for them to do that. All we're doing is letting them know you're eligible to vote. You know, Tennessee, we're at the bottom of the nation when it comes to those who participate in the voting process, especially those amongst the age group of 18 to 24. And so today we need to make a statement that it takes nothing to send them an email or let them give them a sheet of paper in homeroom to say, hey, you're about to turn 18. An election is coming up. If you want to go vote, your local election commission can help you do that. Or Secretary of State Hargett can let you do that. That's it. Let's not politicize something that's a constitutional right. It's something simple. Don't tell young people we don't value your right to vote, nor do we want to not give you the pieces of information to allow you to do that on your own. This bill is not even registering the students to vote themselves. It's literally saying, hey, you're turning 18 before the election. If you want to go vote, that's how you do it. That's it. It's that simple. It costs nothing to just send a statement to our students saying, participate in the election.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Let me ask just one question of you. And it sounds like very innocent what you said, but you've got it here requires an LEA. Have you spoken to the LEAs? Is this putting any undue burden on them that that they may not want? Or have you have any feedback from the various LEAs?
From my understanding, I participated with many LEAs in their voter registration process, especially Shelby County Schools. And as Chairman said, they already are doing it. We're just simply codifying it. So if they're already doing it in practice, you know, if they didn't like the process, I would have hoped that the LEAs or their lobbyists would have reached out to me and said something. But if they're already doing it, it shouldn't be no problem to just codify, as he said, that they're already doing it.
Okay, we have that explanation from Representative Lamar. We are now open for discussion in the committee. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Chairman, and I want to thank Chairman Sapicki for, for not pushing too hard back, so we can at least discuss the bill. To the committee and to the viewing audience, we should be celebrating, the tenets of our republic, the tenets of our democracy. This bill is not registering one single person to vote. It's not registering anything, which I wish it would. That's not just students in Shelby County, but the chairmen that are on this committee, I submit that's students in your districts. Those are students in your high schools. Chairman Reagan, students in your high school. Knowing that they will be able to vote. We should be celebrating that. Chairman Sapicki, we should be celebrating that. And, there's no fiscal note. There's no issue with the schools for doing it. This is democracy. How do we create, I always say that, I always come back to this because, we got to fix the wrongs. Or fix the shortcomings. I won't call them wrong. I call them, areas of deficiency. How do we develop and create our next leaders? If we're not strong in civics, if we're not making sure they understand how this government works, making sure that they understand they have a voice and now you can actually exercise it, and just giving them the information that, to me, is their American right to have. It's their right to know that they're old enough and eligible to vote in the next election, guys. And especially, I want to speak, especially last thing, Mr. Chair, thank you for your indulgence, but to those of us that are military, Chairman Reagan, I'm glad somebody told me. And I hope that you feel the same way. And guys, come on, man, y'all. This is a harmless bill. Thank you.
Representative Long will recognize you've got Chairman Reagan on the next, but you're recognized, Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to roll this bill a week so I can have time to talk to Chairman Sapicki, Secretary of State Trey Hargett about their concerns. Since we weren't able to have a conversation before this. And so if you don't mind, I'd like to roll this a week.
Without objection, House Bill 1020 is rolled 1 week. Thank you. Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to thank my good colleague here for calling my name and giving me the opportunity to say something. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Which one are we back on now? Let's go to number 10. Chairman Vaughn, have you got a committee to go to? Okay.
Take up Vaughn's bill.
We're going to go to item number 10. Representative Gillespie, is he in here? There you are. And the reason I'm taking that one up next committee is we've got guests here to testify, and so that they don't have to sit through all of our dealings, we're going to go ahead and get them next. So item number 10, which is House Bill 631 by Representative Gillespie. You are recognized. You got a motion, you got a second, and you also have a amendment that rewrites the bill. One second. Amendment 5482, correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay. You have a point of order? Oh, okay, okay, point of order, excuse me, motion second on the amendment, which rewrites the bill. We can go ahead and add it to the bill and have the discussion on the bill. All those in favor of adding the amendment to the bill indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. You're now back on the bill. Representative Gillespie, as amended, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. What this bill does is it requires the Tennessee School of Deaf, together with the West Tennessee School of Deaf, to maintain a deaf mentor program to assist families and agencies in implementing a home-based programming for children who are deaf, hearing impaired, or deafblind. And with that, I do have some guests here that would like to speak. And so if we could go out of session to hear them, would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, without objection, we're out of session. And I believe that we have Miss Amy Farrell up here, and also our sign language translator is Sydney Ecker. Okay, you're recognized, Miss Farrell. Make sure that red light's on.
Testing. There we go. First time using a mic, so I feel fancy today. Thanks for letting me speak today on behalf of the Deaf Mentor Program, the bill in front of you. 2 years ago, you passed a pilot version of this program, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the families involved in that program. So I want to thank you up front for passing that. Selfishly, that's helped my family and my daughter get a leg up, so to speak. I am a very proud mother of 2 kids. I have a hearing 5-year-old, or he will tell you his birthday is on April 22nd, and a deaf daughter who is 3. Now, she was born deaf, but we didn't find that out until she was about 11 months old. And that's average, that happens. So she spent the full first year of her life with no access to language, not hearing me say that I love you, me not knowing sign or not knowing that she's deaf. She was receiving no input. And I'm sure you all are all aware that that first 3 years of life is really critical for language development, which is the foundation for education and literacy, which is your key to success in life. So we immediately reached out to TEIS to try and get services to help us navigate this complex path we were on. We took some time to decide whether or not to do cochlear implants that would give her a tool to access sound, but that is a little bit of a process with insurance and all the fun things that come along with that. And I wanted to be able to talk to her immediately in a language that she understood. So with TEIS, I was offered developmental therapy and speech therapy, and we tried both. If Charlie were here with me today, you would know there is nothing developmentally wrong with her. She's on par. She just needed access to a language. And so developmental therapy just did not work. We tried it for a month. We tried speech therapy, and we're still in speech therapy, but without cochlear implants, and she's profoundly deaf. That did me no good. So it just happened to correspond with the passing of the pilot of the Deaf Mentor Program. So we were fortunate enough to be partnered with a deaf mentor and a parent advisor. And that moment changed our world. It's one thing to take ASL classes and learn, hi, my name is Amy. I'm 37 years old and I live in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. But it's quite another as a parent of little children to know how to say, stop hitting your brother, look both ways before you cross the street, and this is what a fire alarm is and how you get out of the house safely. So ASL classes were great, but to have a deaf mentor partnered with me to help me with the stages in life that we were in, immediate language access, how to take the language and make it more accessible to Charlie was just invaluable. She went from no language, very much behind the 8 ball, to fast forward 2 years later, and her language that first year, so she would have been 2 years old, it grew 20 months in that first year of having both a deaf mentor and a parent advisor. And so with that setup, with the deaf mentor and a parent advisor, I'm able to focus on both languages. She now has cochlear implants. So I've got weekly support on ASL and deaf culture, things like how to request an interpreter, simple things like how the heck do I get her attention when she's running down the street or fighting with her brother across the room. I now know I can flick the lights. That works really well. To like really important things like fire safety and explaining why the bed shakes if there's a fire alarm that goes off and what you should do there. And with our parent advisor, I get the English about how to create a good auditory environment, how to, when I take her to soccer practice, how can she hear the coach and how can I get that remote microphone to the coach and help him understand how he needs to communicate with Charlie. Deaf children are at a huge risk of language deprivation, of isolation, because they can't hear. And imagine being at a dinner table where everyone's talking and you can't hear anything and how isolating that would feel. And I feel like now as a parent that I am confident in my advocacy skills. I am confident in her ability to speak up for herself, and she would tell you that herself. And I could have done none of that without the Deaf Mentor pilot that we were a part of. So that impact has been huge. Fast forward to today, 1 year of COVID, and she's 3 years old. She's at Tennessee School for the Deaf. She gets daily speech therapy and her language is through the roof. And her confidence, her own self-advocacy to be able to say, my implants aren't working, you need to sign please, and tell me what she needs for a 3-year-old is just impressive. And I just want to end with all I want for your children as a parent is equal opportunity for my child to be as successful as your child. I want her to have the same education that your child gets, and you can't get that without support like the Deaf Mentor program. So with that, I just, again, thank you so much for your time. This program means so much to me, and it feels good to be heard. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Ms. Farrell. Any members have a question, comment to Ms. Farrell while we're out of session? Representative Parkinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to tell you what a wonderful mom you are. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Farrell, very, very much.
Thank you so much.
We're now back on Representative Gillespie. We're back in session. Representative Gillespie, we're on your bill. Any further comments? Representative Hakeem, you have a question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't know if this should go to Mr. Representative Gillespie or not, but are there opportunities to expand this program in other cities?
Representative Gillespie, can you address that at this time?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what this does, thank you for the question. This is working in all 3 of our grand divisions. It's Jackson, Knoxville, and Nashville. So,
If I may.
Representative Hakeem?
It's not intentional, but there's a consistent effort. I shouldn't say it like that, but Chattanooga has a tendency to be left out, even when you talk about the 3 grand divisions. So as we move forward, I would hope we give consideration to Chattanooga being a part of whatever programs that we're talking about putting together. But something of this nature is great. We appreciate it so much. But let us remember Chattanooga is part of Tennessee also.
Representative Gillespie?
I certainly appreciate that. So this is an in-home program, so it's not necessarily specific to an individual city, if that makes sense. I know there is a distance between them, but I do want to.
I think we can answer your question real quick. We're out of session. Ms. Farrell, come back up and address Mr. Hakeem. You've got your hand up, and I think we can get this taken care of. You're recognized again.
Thank you so much. I actually know the answer to this one. My Deaf Mentor is actually based out of Chattanooga, and There we go. I'm short. Sorry, guys. And it's based out of the schools, but like Representative Gillespie said, it is a home program. And so even though it's based out of the schools, it covers that full East Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, West Tennessee, regardless of the child's location.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions to our guests? Thank you, Ms. Farrell.
Thank
We're back in session. Representative Gillespie, any further comments on your bill?
Just call, no.
I call a question.
The question's been called. Any objection to the question? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving House Bill 631 out to Finance, Ways and Means indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, moves out. Thank you. Chairman Vaughn, you're just worrying me to death. Come on up to the podium. We're going to take care of you. We're on item number 7. Excuse me, it's item number 7, HB 1351. Got a motion, a second. You have, looks like an amendment that rewrites the bill.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Amendment number 6734
6734.
is the amendment.
Okay. It was 6734 is correct. Does it rewrite the bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that the only amendment you have?
Yes, sir. And that amendment, it's effectively the same. There were a few technical corrections that we had coming out of subcommittee
Okay.
that were addressed in this that we cleaned up.
Committee, since it rewrites the bill, let's go ahead and add it to the bill and we have discussion then. All those in favor of adding 6734 to House Bill 1351 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. We're now back on the bill as properly amended. You may describe the bill, Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate it very much. This bill will addresses an issue that's changing in a very fluid landscape of college athletics. What it does, it seeks to put our universities on equal playing field with other universities around the country. To date, Florida, Mississippi, California, Colorado, Nebraska, New Jersey, Michigan, those are 7 states have already approved very similar legislation to this. There's 12 other states that are currently considering it as well. With regards to the amateur model of college athletics and what we're seeing in the NCAA and as well as the court system, there's a lot going on. A few years back, Ed O'Bannon sued the NCAA for the ability to be compensated for his name, image, and likeness. And for those of you you throw that word around there, here's what it means: is he was on a video game and had his name on it, and he was never paid compensation for his name being, his likeness being used as part of the UCLA team on that video game. My son used to dominate with D'Angelo Williams in the backfield in NCAA 2008, something along those lines. And so from that standpoint, the Supreme Court has already ruled on this issue. The law of the land today is that the NCAA cannot prevent athletes from being compensated for their name, the use of their name, use of their image, or their likeness. So what does that look like in the real world? What could that be? There's basically 2 separate orders of magnitude that could be considered and that is being considered by this. One is a superstar athlete who is a surefire hit. You know, let's say when Peyton Manning enrolled at UT, when let's say when Penny Hardaway was enrolled at University of Memphis, or let's take Vanderbilt, the young man that played baseball, Kumar Rocker, was a surefire success. Those superstar athletes would be able to enter into third-party deals for the benefit of their endorsement or for the use of their name or image of likeness. This is not a pay-for-performance nor inducement bill. The law's already been clearly established in this. What this rule does, or what this bill considers, is giving the guidelines to our institutions through our state by how to administer this program for third-party compensation that's already allowed to these athletes. But back to my point, we see that really superstar athlete, and as a matter of fact, perhaps this compensation may convince them that there's less risk to staying in school. But then there's also the hometown hero aspect. of somebody who the local car dealer wants them to come down and make an appearance and have pictures made with local boys and girls because they're great examples. And they're allowed to make $300 for their afternoon's work and receive a 1099. This legislation is broad enough in its writing that the institutions can form their own rules with regards to how these incidents are treated, but it does set up some basic framework, and that is that the athletes have to report this compensation to the institution. The institution has the ability to restrict this. They can't be out advertising for gambling sites or for things that are contrary to the values of the institution. And these activities cannot run into conflict with their responsibilities as part of their grant and aid. They can't miss practice to go do this. There's those basic broad set of guidelines and principles that have been set up in this considered in this legislation. And so what we're asking for this committee to do is to recognize the changing landscape of college athletics, understand that institutions that our universities are competing against have already approved this legislation. Florida's kicks into gear in July 1st of 2021. So in 3 short months, they're going to be off to the races with their athletes. And so what we're trying to do is level that playing field. There's even this week, Alston versus the NCAA is being litigated in the Supreme Court. And so we're going to be finding out whether or not the NCAA has violated antitrust rules. Congress has received a bill that has been also offered for this. So what we're trying to do is establish ground, claim the ground now, and then so we'll be in a great position to be leaders in this area. And with that, I'll take any questions you might have, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Haston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing this bill. I think it's a marketplace fairness bill in a lot of ways. And back when I was in college, like 5 or 6 years ago, my teammates and I would see our jerseys and our posters, and I was in a couple of those video games. The only reason my son thinks I'm remotely have any coolness is I'm in a couple of those old video games. And we would joke like it'd be nice, be nice to have a cut of this. And we'd say that to some of our administrators, something say, hey, your payment is scholarship and everything. And I'll say this, that was a reasonable argument. I'd say 70s, 80s, even early 90s. Back then, I think there was a more of an economic balance between the NCAA, universities, coaches' salaries, scholarships were all kind of in a reasonable location. What's happened in the last 20 or 30 years is the NCAA has created an incredibly lucrative marketplace. They've done a good job of that. It's culminated in 2016. They signed a $8.8 billion contract for 8 years with CBS. So what's happened with that and this influx of money is that you have NCAA revenues have skyrocketed. Their top 10 executives make $8 million. So you have the NCAA revenues has rocketed. You have the university's revenue that's getting a share has gone up significantly. Coaches' salaries have spiked, but yet the scholarships, the student athletes, they're at the same. And all of this is built really on the efforts of the student athletes. So there's been a marketplace that's been created, but yet the people that have the biggest impact on the marketplace aren't allowed to participate in any of the benefits, or a large part of the benefits have been created. So I'll sum up with this. I appreciate the indulgence, but right now, up until this point, the NCAA has taken 2 positions on this. They've said no to sharing any of the revenue directly with the student athletes, and they've said no to allowing student athletes to make any money from a third party. And all this is doing, all that's happened now is they've reversed course on that second point I just made and allowed states to be able to make the decision on allowing this to take place. And I just appreciate the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Haston. It's very helpful. We have Chairman Sapicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you bringing this bill. I'm going to be conflicted on this bill, so I'm going to ask the clerk to record me as present. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Chairman Hakeem. Representative Bond, I'm sorry.
I was going to Chairman Hastings' point. I was in this mode. I was one of the most missed out on greatest potential college athletes that ever lived, but nobody saw that talent in me. And for years, I thought that the way that things were a fair deal. But when the millions turned into billions, it all went awry. And that is what got me that overwhelming sense of fairness, and seeing kids, young men and young women out there plying their trade and generating these tremendous revenue amounts. And then one block ruins a career. And that type of thing, to me, just it brought the whole order of magnitude of all of this, the risk, the reward, everything. It seems like that this helps balance that out. And so that was the very reason I brought it, was because the sums got so very large.
Right. Well, I've contacted that department store and they've got that $150 check on your way that you missed out on. We got Representative Hakeem. Oh, you're okay. Anyone else? Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just questions for clarity. As I reviewed your bill, I did not see it mentioned anywhere in here that the institution can get compensation for those athletes appearing. Does the institution that okays this and tracks it, do they get any fee or any portion of the compensation?
You're recognized.
That is not contemplated within this bill, sir. No.
You recognized.
Follow-on question. I think this is obviously aimed, if we will, at the major sports like football and basketball and perhaps to some degree baseball. But for the minor sports like perhaps lacrosse or competition swimming or track, perhaps rowing or judo or some of those other sports that are in the collegiate realm, does this bill contemplate anything for those athletes, or are they just going to be thrown in the mix, or how's this going to work?
Chairman Bond.
Yes, sir. The marketplace will decide whose name, image, and likeness has value. And, that's one of the things that was, from my standpoint, this is all about capitalism. There's value to people work to establish the value in their name based upon the sweat of their brow. It's a results-oriented business. And so it speaks much the same way why 100,000 people will watch, I could say a mediocre football team, but a great football team. Or they may, 25 parents show up, to support a lesser non-revenue sport. That's just the marketplace in general. And so that's what this bill is it's just purely a marketplace vehicle and response and vehicle for these institutions to know what we expect of them and so the athletes can know what's expected of them as well.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Chairman Hassan, do you have a follow-up to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Reagan, to your question, also, we talk about unintended consequences, but I think maybe this is an intended consequence of this bill that's a positive, is that I don't even know what a social media influencer is. I know just enough to be dangerous, but there are cases so far where there are student athletes that come in that have a pre-existing business in the marketplace. It may be reviewing movies online. And once they come in to be a student athlete, they've been asked to have to step down from earning that living that they had already established. So it would protect them also. So somebody that's on the lacrosse team may already have a business that they started in high school reviewing movies or cars or, sports cards. And that would protect them also to continue on with being able to use their likeness and image to do something that doesn't even connect with their sport.
Representative Clemens.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the sponsor mentioning our Vandy boys with Rocker. Let's add Jack Leiter to that list as well. But and I also appreciate my colleague back here from Anderson County mentioning rowing. As a former collegiate rower, I think I probably fall in your category with no monetization there. But that raises the question of these athletes. They need to be aware. A lot of these, I think, perhaps unfairly considered lesser sports are also Olympic sports. And so some of these athletes that compete in collegiate athletics in these sports that are also Olympic sports, they also have to comply with amateur rules with regards to the Olympic Committee. And I just want to make sure, support the bill. I just want to make sure that the students are going in eyes wide open as to what we're allowing them to do versus what maybe an Olympic committee doesn't allow them to do.
Chairman Vaughn.
I appreciate you bringing up that point because one of the things that this bill contemplates is the financial literacy component as well as the regulatory component that the institutions will be providing to the student athletes. Also, if a third party is involved in the negotiation, whether it be a parent, whether it be an uncle, whether it be an athletic agent, it is required that they have fiduciary responsibilities in negotiating these third-party compensation deals. And one of the things that I'd like to point out is what's something that I never really figured out was that until looking into this is some of the most highly compensated college athletes right now are the esports. They're students that go and they attend college there, but they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars competing in video game tournaments. Who knew? But that's out there, and these students are not discriminated against by them not being able to get paid this third-party funding. So that's, again, I'll sit down and hush, though.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Parson? Question's been called. Any objection to that question? Hearing none. We're now on House Bill 1351. It's properly amended. All those in favor of moving it to Finance, Ways and Means indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Chairman Vaughn, you have one more before we go to Representative Calfee on item number 5. House Bill 1443, Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you so much. In staying consistent with the athletics theme, this bill contemplates the free agency period for teachers. Once they have, the LEA has let them know that they will not be retained. It speaks to how messages are delivered, how that notice is delivered to teachers, and the time period that when that is. And so what?
Chairman Vaughn, I'm sorry, you do have an amendment.
I sure do. It's Amendment 6213.
Does it rewrite the bill?
Yeah. 6213.
6403?
That's right.
You got a motion and a second on the amendment.
6403 is where it was after we made the technical. We did a verbal amendment, and that includes the verbal amendment.
Okay, but it doesn't rewrite, it's a verbal amendment, okay. Okay, members, we're on the amendment. All those in favor of adding 6403 to the bill indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We're now back on your bill as amended, and that description you just gave of 1443. Any further comments?
No, sir.
Representative Parson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. There's an issue or a rub, a challenge, or something. Also with schools that are releasing teachers and having time to make sure that they have their team in place before the year starts. Also, is that covered in there?
What this does is this prescribes that, as opposed to saying that the teacher has to receive a notice within 5 days, what this does is this says it has to be sent within 5 days. And so, because we can't control whether or not the teacher receives it, but it also opens it up for email, which if the teacher is still employed by the school, we know they have email addresses, and it contemplates overnight carriers as well. So,
Right.
so this actually will shorten that period down, so the LEAs will know what their staffing is, because they're not having to pursue a teacher to get them a hard copy of their release.
Right. And Mr. Chair,
You recognize?
thank you. You gave me way more technical response than I was asking for. So this is only at the high level of LEAs releasing teachers, but not individual schools saying that the teacher is not coming back to that school, which means they may not necessarily be released from the LEA.
Correct.
Is that in there also, or is it
No,
just
sir,
LEAs?
This is contemplates the LEA, the non-retention of the teacher by
Okay.
the LEA.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much.
Okay, members, we're now back on the bill as 1443 is amended already. Any objection to the question? Hear none. All those in favor of moving 1443 out to calendar rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Moves out. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Enjoyed my time with you today.
All right. What we're going, members, what we'll do now, we'll go back to number 5 with Mr. Kent, Representative Kent Calfee. And then I do, members, if you indulge me after this one, I do have a guest here to speak on one bill, and I'd like to go ahead and take that. That'll be item number 21, I believe. So we can let the guest not stay here the whole time. Item number 5, House Bill 1246, Representative Calfee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is an amendment,
Amendment?
6546. It should be traveling with the bill.
6546 rewrites the bill. Can we add it to the bill before we begin discussion? Without objection, all those in favor of 6546 being added to the bill, 1246, indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We're now back on your bill as property amendment. You may describe the bill.
Mr. Chairman, this is a bill that would have been a great thing to have several years ago. Basically, it's a student right to know bill, and it covers things such as what you're going to get out of going to vocational school, TCAT, what the positions are you can obtain a certificate in, what it's going to pay, what's availability of jobs, same thing with colleges. It also covers enlisting the military, about what trades are available in the military and what kind of signing bonuses. And it's brought to me by THEC. And like I said, I wish it'd been effective years ago, because a lot of people graduating high school really don't know what they want to do. So I'll take any questions.
Questions for Representative Calfee? Representative Hurt, Chairman Hurt, and then we'll come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say thank you for this, and I would like to stress, I think it's a great idea, but I also want to stress, and I know THEC has plans or whatever, that this information is really put out there to the students, because in my mind, I think a lot of students maybe think about the school they want to go to, and they go to that website or whatever, but make sure they know where, I guess it's the THEC website, that this is found and exactly how it can be found, because this would be incredible information for those students to know. And I appreciate you putting this out there, but just making sure we get that information to students through the counselors, I'm guessing the school counselors. But again, thank you for it.
Representative Calfee?
There's a platform that will be available to all schools, and it shouldn't be hard for any school to pull it up, guidance counselors, teachers, principals, students, and see just what's available out there. And it's a great bipartisan bill. I've got a co-signer sitting right here on the front row.
Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Calfee, I think another positive, maybe unintended effect of this one is this information coming to the legislature, so we can see what degrees our higher education institutions are focusing on and what kind of job availability there is in those fields and how much they pay. And maybe we can, as the General Assembly, look and see if we need to prioritize those resources differently or keep. But anyway, I think that will be a positive side effect to this. So appreciate you bringing the bill.
Recognize?
I'm confident that THEC will make that information available to us.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo that what the sponsor said, that this is a good piece of bipartisan legislation, and he has a good person signed on as a co-sponsor.
All righty. You're referring to Chairman Reagan, right? Okay. All right. Any further discussion on House Bill 1246? Question been called. Objection to the question? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving House Bill 1246 to government operations indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. It moves out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and committee.
Members, with your indulgence, since we have a guest here to speak on a bill, could we move over to item number 21? And I'm going to pass the gavel to Chairman Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, next on the calendar is House Bill 1305. Can I get a motion in a second? Properly motioned and seconded. The sponsor is Chairman White. With that, Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Hurt. And we do not have amendments, so it's a clean bill. Members, where this came from is brought to me dealing with open enrollment within a district, not outside of a district, within a district. Many districts already do this, but there's a little bit of lack of clarity. And it's really done for the parents for the parents' sake, what it's asking for, number one, is that all districts should determine how much space is available in each building, grade, class, and program every year to determine the capacity. It also is transparency. And then it says the districts need to publish their capacity on their website 14 days in advance of an open enrollment period. And the open enrollment is a 30-day period at their choosing. The flexibility is there. We're not determining that for the LEA. And then if there's space available, the parent can be admitted. If there is no space, if there's too many applying for that one particular school, then the schools can conduct a lottery to determine which ones get in. But it's just more of a transparency bill to allow, it's a parent bill, to really allow parents, if they're in one school, that they can go to another school outside their zone. And we had a question asked in committee last week about the TWSAA rule, and I think Representative Sapicki asked that, and I have the TWSAA representative here to address that. So could Representative Sapicki ask his, well, may want to go out of session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, we will go out of session. And I asked Representative from TWSAA, Mr. Childress, to come to the front, and he'll have a few comments for us and then answer some questions if need be. If you would, sir, make sure the red button is lit up, and your name and who you're with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Bernard Childress. I'm the Executive Director of the TWSAA. And I'm here to address concerns on the transfer rule. I guess our transfer rule. But I would just start by saying that many of our schools already have open enrollment or open zones. So we already deal with this. Our bylaws state that a student's zone is determined by bus routes. And when I said bus routes, I'm saying that we simply ask the question, if a student walks out of their home, gets to the closest bus stop and gets on the bus, where does it take them? That's how we determine our school zones. But our bylaws do state that once a student establishes an athletic record with the member school, if they transfer, it must be a bona fide change of residence by the entire family unit that justifies the change in schools in order for that student to be eligible. If it's not a bona fide change of residence by the entire family unit, the kid has established an athletic record at one member school, they transfer, they will be ineligible 12 months past their last date of participation at the varsity level in the sport in which they participated in, or the sports in which they participated in. And I can say that every sport stands on its own. So they would be ineligible at the varsity level. If they transfer, they could practice and play JV until that 12 months is up, but they would be ineligible if they transfer without a bona fide change of residence by the entire family unit. So there's been no movement in as far as the membership is concerned. And let me say that, first of all, that our schools, we are an organization of member schools. Our school administrators write their own rules. The only thing they ask us to do is enforce what they want. And there's been no movement by the administrators in any of our schools to say that they wanted to change the transfer rule. So if a bill like this were to pass, the transfer rule would remain the same. A kid transfers with an athletic record, they're going to be ineligible if they do not have a bona fide change of residence that justifies the change in schools. The only thing that I think you all need to know that it would, as far as students finishing the highest ending grade in their building. For example, if 8th graders who are middle school athletes, once they finish the highest ending grade in their building, our rule states that they are eligible wherever their parents decide to put them in school as a 9th grader. If this bill passes, they again would have no effect on them because they have no athletic record. The transfer rules, our transfer rules, only applies once a student establishes an athletic record at a member school and then transfers. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you all have about our transfer rule.
Thank you, sir. First on the list, members, we have Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, sir, for being here too. I'm glad to finally see you, actually. I got a question. The rules that you stated, those rules, are those policy rules that come from TSAA, or are those rules in statute?
No, that's rules. That's our bylaws. That's TSAA bylaws. That's rules that the schools actually wrote and they vote on themselves. And we have our own bylaws.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chair, just another question.
You're recognized.
You mentioned the entire family move. What happens if parents separate and it's not the entire family?
We have exactly in our bylaws, it state that if a family separates, then the parents decide where that student goes. What they have to submit to us is to show that there's been a separation, a legal separation, or that there is sometimes we will get something that's been filed in the court saying that it's been a legal separation, or divorce papers are being processed through the court. If we get that, then the student is eligible to participate.
You're recognized, Representative Parkinson.
And thank you for that explanation. Just a little concern in situations where there may be domestic violence, or situations where there may be an emergency move, or there may be a reason for move that it hasn't gone through the courts yet. Do the bylaws address that also?
Absolutely. We have a hardship provision, and anytime something like that happens, they submit a hardship application to us explaining what the situation is. It's strictly confidential information that only right now the executive director is allowed to read. We make a decision, and if something like that were to happen, we grant them a hardship and allow them to play.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Next on the list is Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. This body recently considered a situation concerning foster children, and the concern, in fact, the case that was cited was a foster child was denied eligibility because of a transfer in his foster home situation. Is your rule situation going to allow that, or is the bill going to force you to? How are you going to handle that, sir?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question, because that is something that when we read the bill, and I understand the situation that you're in. The transfer rule does say that if you transfer, you have to live with a guardian for a minimum of 12 months. But we have addressed, as far as foster students are concerned, foster kids, they can also apply for a hardship. And I've been executive director for 12 years now. And I can tell you, we get many foster kids that transfer from one home to another. I can't remember a case where I denied a hardship if the school did what they needed to do as far as submitting the information that we need to have. We don't deny foster kids the opportunity to participate.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Chairman Sapicki.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Childs, for coming in and clarifying this. The only thing I want to make sure what I understood correctly was when an eighth grader finishes their eighth grade year of eligibility, let's just say in Metro Nashville, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they go to their high school, they could go to any high school in Metro Nashville and establish their eligibility at that new school.
That is correct.
And if they're zoned for school X and they go to school Y, they wouldn't have to sit out. They could come in and start playing varsity sports right away.
That is correct. It's totally left up to their parents or guardian as to where they put them in school.
Or possibly a coach that would recruit them.
Recruiting is by rule. We do not allow recruiting, athletic recruiting.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Could an athlete in eighth grade choose to go to a school of their choice in Metro if there's open enrollment?
Yes.
Any school they want to go to.
If it's open enrollment?
Yeah.
In eighth grade, once they finish the highest ending grade in that building, is what you're asking?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, members. Next on the list is Representative Hakeem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, sir, for being here with us. I guess what I wanted to ask, for there not to be any conflict with the rules that you and guidelines that you have now, would there have to be an exception? I didn't know. I'm asking a question. Would there have to be an exception for your rules and guidelines to stay in place if this bill moves forward as is, as you understand it?
Would it have to be an exception? No, it wouldn't have to be an exception. Our rules are what they are. We have, basically what we have is business meetings every November where schools, any member school can submit a proposal for change in the bylaws. They have to have that into our office by October the 15th. If they have it into the office by October the 15th, it is placed on the agenda. We have business meetings throughout the state of Tennessee in November. All of the schools have an opportunity to speak for or against that proposal and decide on whether or not they want to change the rules. But what I'm saying to you, there has been no movement to change our transfer rules. So our transfer rules would remain the same.
Okay. If I could, one other.
You're recognized. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, sir. This may be to legal. The bill that is before us, would the rules and guidelines of TWSAA, is there any conflict, or is it two separate positions altogether?
Legal, you're recognized.
John Williams, Office of Legal Services. So the language in House Bill 1305 allows for an open enrollment period and the process for that. So it's separate from rules that would be established.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions for our guest? Representative Clements, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quickly, so does the TWSAA or do you, in your capacity, propose changes as a result of laws up here to your membership?
Oh, absolutely. We're going to follow the law. If a law changes that changes our bylaws, then definitely we would take that to the membership and to our legislative council. Actually, it's a 12-member council where we have 4 members from Middle, East, and West Tennessee that compose that actually write our bylaws. If a law changes that changes our bylaws, we would definitely have to address that and change our bylaws to make sure that we follow the law.
So my question is if this bill passed, it doesn't necessarily change your bylaws.
It does not.
But you still have rules that would deem students ineligible if they transfer. So, and I know, high school coaches, your membership, they're not following everything we do up here. So my question is, do you, with knowledge of the laws that are passing up here, ever suggest changes for them to consider as a result of scenarios we create with laws that don't necessarily change your bylaws?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. And last, we have Chairman Haston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Childress, good to have you here today. Our paths have crossed several times over the years with high school sports. And one quick question. 2014, I got 2 technicals and was ejected from a basketball game. I had a fine and I was suspended 1 game. I appealed that, and I have been waiting 7 years for this moment, and maybe a small part of the reason I got elected, but I just was wondering why I failed in that appeals process. You can get back to me later if you think about it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chairman.
I'll do that.
Thank you, Mr. Childress. Anything else, members? With that, thank you, Mr. Childress, for being here. Appreciate it. We'll go back in session, members.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Any questions for the sponsor? Question's been called. No objection. We'll be voting on House Bill 1305. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Bill passes to calendar and rules.
Okay, members, we will continue on and see if we can move. We've got several bills that have been enrolled, so we'll make quick order. Let's go back to item number 1, House Bill 73 by Chairman Hurt. Chairman Hurt, you are recognized. You have a motion and second on the bill, but you do have an amendment that rewrites the bill. Would you give us that number is, make sure we're on the same
Yes.
page.
Yes, sir. I have amendment number 5750.
Correct. Members, this rewrites the bill. Can we go ahead and add the amendment and discuss the bill as a properly amended? Motion and a second. All those in favor of adding the amendment to House Bill 73 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We're now back on your bill as amended. You are recognized, Chairman Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, it's an honor to be in front of you with legislation like this that we know will positively affect students and outcomes. Recognizing an arising challenge in our schools, Governor Lee has brought forward a large investment in the mental health needs of students in our K-12 schools. In a year where our state is blessed with abundant one-time funding, the governor believes that a wise use of these dollars is an investment that will impact well into the future. Allocating $250 million in the proposed budget, this legislation lays out a framework for how these dollars can be invested now and be utilized long-term. After working with the Department of Education, Department of Mental Health, Department of Finance and Administration, and the State Treasurer's Office, we believe the amendment before you today will set a strong base for how these funds should be used and overseen. This is the start of what we hope will be a fund that builds and grows over time and has flexibility in how it can be used to address issues that are known now and unknown challenges that may face us in the future. As amended, this bill does the following. Establishes the K-12 Mental Health Trust Fund Act, designates trustees to oversee the fund. Those trustees are the state treasurer, chair, the comptroller, the secretary of state, the commissioner of finance. Allows the trust to invest the funds for the first time in fiscal year 21-22. Creates two accounts for the funds to be deposited in. 90% of the investment must go into the endowment account and constitute the principal of the fund. 10% will be placed in a special reserve account. The fund is split this way to ensure a portion of this fund is liquid for use in distributions. The fund is allowed to accept gifts, contributions, bequests, etc. The principal of the fund may not be expended for any purpose. The trustees will annually determine how much funding can be allocated for expenditure based on the return. The funds made available will be used by the Department of Mental Health in consultation with the Department of Education and must be expended for use with K-12 students. And with that, I would like to delve a little deeper today for just a second and kind of explain how this will be done on an individual school basis. I had a lot of questions over the past week of, we're just going to hire counselors. What are we going to do with this money? How's this going to work? And I'm going to touch on it. And if need be, we have the Department of Health here that can elaborate a little more. But basically across our state, there's one in all 95 counties. There's a school-based behavioral health liaison. Those liaisons in coordination with the schools will develop a plan that's needed for each individual school. So there'll be a lot of local control as to how this money is utilized and addressed. And then that plan that's developed will be taken to the county mental health, and then from there to the department. And the funds will be approved and issued on an individual basis across the state to be utilized best in each school. With that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, members, that explanation, discussion on House Bill 73. Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few questions. Anytime we're dealing with this amount of money, worry about how it's spent and where it's spent, rightfully so. And I'm trying to find in this bill, so what are we going to use the interest or whatever amount is determined to be spent every year on contractors to provide mental health services to students? Or are we going to provide that money directly to LEAs?
That money will be directed through the Department of Mental Health. The way I understand it, we can get the department to come and clarify, but the way I understand it, the plan is submitted, it comes through the Department of Mental Health to the LEA to be administered. But again, we may probably need to get that clarified with the Department of Mental Health, Mr. Chairman, to make sure I don't misspeak.
Okay, I think that'd probably be a good idea, but I want to ask one more question before we do that, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
You recognize?
Thank you. And so there's also a provision in here dealing with the possible creation of a nonprofit corporation to handle this. Do we have any lines being drawn about who can serve as the officers of that nonprofit corporation, or what compensation would be for someone serving on that nonprofit?
You recognize?
I couldn't answer that question. I would say that, the trustees that oversee the fund would probably have a large influence on that, which would be the treasurer, the comptroller, the secretary of state, and the commissioner of finance.
Right, and I understand they'll be overseeing that trust fund, but if the money is going through or to or to be managed by the nonprofit, I necessarily have questions about who's going to serve in that capacity and what possible compensation would be and to whom. But Mr. Chairman, unless somebody else has an objection, can we go out of session to hear from the department real quick?
Any objection? Hearing none, we're out of session. Representative Clemens, who you want to bring up?
I think he referenced the Department of Mental Health. Who's going to be handling this?
Yes, sir. All right, just state your name and position, and you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. Zach Blair with the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. Representative Clemens, I'm happy to answer the first one, and I may need to defer to the Treasurer's Office on the second. The first question regarding the spending of the money, our department's practice is once we receive funds from the General Assembly through the budget process, we typically will do an announcement of funding, and then individual organizations, typically our community providers in the mental health sphere, will then say that they can accomplish those goals or provide those services through our provider network. And then we can deploy those services to the LEAs as needed, depending on the assessment and the needs that they have identified in those schools for the entire state.
You recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, correct me if I'm wrong. So you will be paying whatever amount of money that you're appropriated vendors to provide these services to LEAs rather than appropriating those or sending that money directly to the LEA to use as they see fit.
So there is flexibility, Representative Clemens, in the bill. So, in theory, there could be situations where it could possibly go directly to the LEA. That's not typically been our practice. We contract with community mental health centers throughout the state to provide services, interventions, prevention, and other services in the mental health realm to individuals through the Behavioral Health Safety Net is a good example, the Children's Behavioral Health Safety Net, and the Creating Homes initiative that's administered by our department. We use those funds to deploy those services through the network of community providers that we have throughout the state.
And so right now, I had introduced legislation earlier this year to provide behavioral health and mental health test screening for students to be able to identify which ones and what type of programs were needed or what type of treatment was needed. How are LEAs going to determine who needs treatment and what type of treatment for purpose of presenting that information to the department?
Sure. So the plan for our needs assessment is to use the infrastructure that we have through the school-based behavioral health liaisons. The General Assembly was, we were very grateful that you approved money to expand that program from the 36 counties it covered to 95 counties. And because that infrastructure is in place, we can now use those 95 county school-based behavioral health liaisons. There are some counties that have multiple due to their size, but they can work individually with the district, individually with schools to determine, is there a prevalence of a certain type of need or service in that community that would best serve that area of the state, and then we can deploy those resources with this funding and the other funding that we have in the department.
Okay. I just want to emphasize that detailed, as you know, as you well know, that very specific, localized detail about what type of treatment is necessary for each child at each school, or what's prevalent at one school may not be the same for another, even in rural counties where there's only one or two high schools, perhaps. So just to make sure I have this straight, so the constitutional officers essentially are going to be the trustees, manage this account. They're going to invest those monies as they see fit. Principal can't be touched. The interest is going to come out. They'll determine what amount of interest that they will appropriate to you. And the legislature is not going to determine that amount. The trustees are going to determine what amount of interest is invested with the Department of Health for purpose of this legislation. Is that right?
Representative Clemens, yes, sir. So the trust principal will generate interest and then will be added based on the trustee's action to that reserve account that can then be spent and deployed for services along with the initial 25 million deposit that will be available for use at the first deposit that occurs in this year's budget.
But that's not going to require legislative action. That's going to be determined by the trustees through the department.
That is my understanding. Yes, sir.
Once we create this, that's
Correct.
how it's going to flow.
And we do anticipate that we will need a little while to determine how much money on a recurring basis will be transferred from the principal over to the reserve account for the use of services.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any other further questions that are guests while we're out of session? Hearing none. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
We're back in session, and I do have to make a typo correction. I'd like to request a verbal amendment. Mr. Williams, in section 1, section 49-3-502, subdivision 14, it reads, the state is not liable. And we need to take out the word be, delete the word be in the second sentence so that it will correct the typo. Would you like to see that, Chairman Hurt? The state is not be. You got to get rid of that be.
Gotcha.
And so that's just a typo correction. Do I have a motion second to add the verbal amendment? Okay, motion second. Any objection? All those in favor of the correcting the deleting the word be in this amendment indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Can we have that corrected?
Clarified legal. This was handed to me.
Okay, got that correct. We had a late filed amendment, but it didn't go through correcting that, but we've already corrected the typo. Okay, members, we're now back on the bill that we've already properly amended it earlier. Further discussion of Chairman Hurd on House Bill 73. Representative Bond.
Thank you, Chairman White. The state of Tennessee provides many valuable services for its citizens. I guess my question is what's the rationale for creating a trust fund to provide mental health services? For example, several years ago, we allocated $20 or $30 million for funding SROs across the state, but we didn't do it with the trust fund. It operated through the regular budget. Why a trust fund for these services?
Chairman Hurd.
The basis for the trust fund is to ensure that the money will always be there once we institute a program, that the principal will be there, and this program will operate off of the interest so that we can handle what we're facing now along with what we're facing in the future and not have to go back and try to continue to fund it after the money runs out. So the trust fund concept was to maintain the program as long as need be for our schools.
Representative Bond. Okay, thank you. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you may have answered this, and I apologize if I got caught. But how much money is expected to be generated from the trust fund to be utilized for mental health?
You recognize?
And I've asked that question, and from what I understand, it could vary, of course, on the returns, anywhere from 2% to 6% for in the information that I've received from it. Most common answer I got was around 2 to 4% interest on the $225 million that will be put in the trust.
You recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let's see, 250 million, 10% of that be 25 million. Half of that in the 5% area would be about, come on, mathematicians, what's that? 17.5? Is that 17.5 million annually?
12.5.
What is it, 12.5? Did I miss that? I was doing 35 million. 12.5 million.
25.
In the 5% range. So 12.5 million annually. this is a great start, but a good start, but we may need to figure out a way to bump that up some more. Thank you, sir.
Chairman Hurt?
And I agree with you, but let me be clear on those numbers that from what I've been told, there was nothing guaranteed as far as any dollars. It was the interest and the returns each year will be determined moving forward on what we get.
Okay, and before we finish with the bill and take the vote, I'd like to ask legal to the verbal amendment we did and the, I believe it was 6367, roll those together. 575, that's right, 5750. Thank you. Okay, members, further discussion on House Bill 73. Any objection to the Representative Chairman Reagan?
Just a quick question. There's no sunset on this operation, is that correct?
The way I understand it, that is correct.
That might be a mistake. Thank you.
I could stand corrected, Chairman.
Okay, I heard a motion on the bill. Any objection to that motion? All those in favor of moving House Bill 73 out to Finance, Ways and Means indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Moves out. Thank you. Members, I'm going to go through and we're going to kind of clean the calendar up. We're going to get to Chair Lady Weaver next. Item number 2, Representative Leader Gant asked this to be rolled to the first calendar of 2022. Item number 3, we've already taken care of. Item number 4, Chairman Farmer asked to roll it 1 week. Item number 5, we have taken care of. Item number 6 is rolled 1 week. By Representative Johnson. We have taken care of item number 7. Item number 8, we have taken care of. That brings us to item number 9, House Bill 1534 by Chair Lady Weaver. Got a motion and a second. Chair Lady, do you have any amendments that we need to add?
The amendment of 5839 should be with the bill. You should have that before.
5839
Yes,
rewrites the bill.
yes, yes,
So
sir.
with that, if we get a motion and a second on the amendment, all those in favor of adding the amendment that rewrites the bill to the House Bill 1534 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Okay, we've added the amendment. Now you may describe what 1534 does.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. Hang in there. The day is almost done. Okay, so House Bill 1534, why do we need this bill? High teacher turnover, or churn is what they call it, undermines student achievement, consumes valuable staff time and resources. It also contributes to teacher shortages throughout the country, as roughly there are 6 of 10 new teachers hired each year are replacing colleagues who have left the classroom before retirement. And the research continues to show that urban districts can, on an average, spend more than $20,000 on each new hire, including school and district expenses related to separation, recruitment, hiring, and training. These investments don't pay their full dividend when teachers leave within 1 to 2 years after being hired. I know all of us are aware of our teacher shortage. I know you're also aware, and we're working hard to get qualified teachers before our students in the classroom. And so what House Bill 1534 seeks to do is, as introduced, as amended, creates a new practitioner license for persons seeking to become licensed teachers and requires the State Board of Education to approve alternative teaching teacher endorsement and licensure pathways. The amendment does rewrite this bill, as I said earlier, to require that the State Board of Education approve that process for school districts to create teacher training programs aimed at recommending current educators for additional endorsements. And these requirements would take effect in July of 2022. The recruitment and retention of effective educators is an issue impacting public education in Tennessee. And without high-quality teachers, our public school students suffer. And generally, if a teacher would like to add an endorsement, they are required to attend an educator preparation program and submit qualifying scores on an assessment. Data from the beginning of the school year indicated that 139 districts had approximately over 1,000 total vacancies, has 1,070 total vacancies, which would include unfilled positions and positions filled with a teacher who is teaching without a license or outside of their endorsement area via a permit or a waiver. House Bill 1534 helps address this issue by requiring the state board to approve this process that gives our school districts the ability to create teacher training programs, gives our districts flexibility. I want to stop there for a minute. I spoke with some of my school administrators, and they're just saying to us down here, give us flexibility. They know what teachers will qualify for their kids. They really do. They do this all the time. So it's in their best interest to hire or put a teacher in front of their kids that is qualified. The main thing I want you to grab out of this is we're not just picking at any teacher willy-nilly just to come in the classroom. There's requirements that are stipulated in the bill. For one, under this bill, teachers would receive the training needed to add an additional endorsement without being required to enroll in an educator preparation program, which is the Praxis test. The bill does require a teacher to take an assessment to add an endorsement unless they have been teaching for more than 6 years, they've received above expectation or significantly above expectation, they are a level 4 or 5 on their most recent evaluation. And this exception, however, if you remember, this will not apply to a teacher if they are adding an endorsement in grades K through 3, because we already worked on that when we had special session. So we didn't want to mess that up. So the goal of the alternative endorsement pathway created under this bill is to increase retention of high-quality educators by providing additional flexibility at the local level, and thus, ultimately, we benefit our students. Now, I do have something I want to read to you that I thought was important. I thought it was important when I read it, and I want to share this with you. This is an email from a teacher who sent me this. And he said that I want to contact you regarding the Praxis Teacher Certification Assessments and give you my thoughts and story of my situation. I am scheduled to graduate in May with my master's in instructional leadership from the University of West Alabama. I have taught in Tennessee for the past 6 years, but decided to obtain my master's through UWA in Alabama. Now that it is time to take my Praxis exam for Alabama, I contacted the Department of Education to make sure my scores, Tennessee Department of Education, my scores would be reciprocated just like they were for my undergrad Praxis scores. But unfortunately, Tennessee Department of Education will not accept the same test scores that Alabama requires, therefore forcing me to take an additional exam, costing me, the teacher, $425 compared to the $120 exam for Alabama. This was very frustrating to me as I try to further my education, but am met with obstacles from my own home state and the system I have worked for 6 years. I would thoroughly support the bill. I thoroughly support the bill. And if there's anything I can do to help, because he goes on to say, thank you for your hard work, trying to make it easier for teachers to future their education without breaking the bank. Considering our pay is already lower than it should be, I thought I'd say that. If there's anything I can do to help you get this bill passed, please let me know. I mean, here's an example, and there's plenty of these. And we live, as you know, Tennessee borders 8 states. We lose educators on a regular basis to these states. We may have limited the LEAs in keeping great educators within our state. Again, my administrator says, give us flexibility. We know how to do this. Educators that may see opportunity for themselves across the state line, they're going to go there. They're just going to go there. The goal of the alternative endorsement pathway is to increase retention of high quality educators by providing additional flexibility at local level Thus again, we benefit our students. I think I've spoken enough. I think you all got it. But I'm open for questions.
Okay, committee, with that thorough explanation by Chair Lady Weaver, we're on discussion for 1534. Discussion, committee.
What did I do?
Any objection to the question being called? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving 1534 out to government operations indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Members,
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members.
okay. Thank you. We're at the will of the committee, we're past our normal 5 o'clock hour. We do a few more, but we do have a committee next week. And keep from wearing people out. When we have another committee, we may entertain a motion here in a minute. But let's go on down to, excuse me, let me not jump over something. Item number 10, we've already taken care of. House Bill 631 has been dealt with. Item number 11, House Bill 1342. I believe that Representative Carringer, you're carrying this bill.
I am.
We've got a motion and a second, and you do have an amendment.
Mhm.
Would you verify it's 4781?
That is correct, Chairman.
Motion and a second on the amendment. It rewrites the bill, so we can go ahead and add it to the bill for discussion. All those in favor of adding the amendment to the bill indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Okay, your bill has been amended. You're now back on 1342 for discussion, Representative.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the members here. So House Bill 1342 does exactly what the amendment says. It's Tennessee Code Annotated Section 49-5-716 is amending by designating the current language as subsection and adding the following as a new subsection. For purposes of this section, a teacher school or school district is not closed when teachers are required to work remotely and provide virtual instruction to students. So this act takes effect upon becoming a law and the public welfare requiring it.
Okay, members, we've had the question called. Do I have objection to that question? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving House Bill 1342 out of the calendar rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Is Representative Love still in the room? Would you like to carry your bill today, Chairman Representative Love? Okay, members, we're on House Bill 1. Got a motion second on House Bill 1001. And you also have an amendment.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. It is Amendment 6407, I think is the.
It rewrites the bill. It's so we're going 6407 is correct. So we go ahead and add it to the bill. All those in favor of adding to the bill indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We're now back on your bill as amended, House Bill 1001. Tell us what it does.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Very simply, as we are trying to make life for our students much better in their matriculation K through 12, this would simply improve the student to counselor ratio from 1 to 350 students. I think in our high schools, it's already that ratio. This would just be through K through 7, I believe. With that,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, here for questions.
Discussion on your bill. This came through subcommittee, and that subcommittee is the will to kind of entertain this and see where it goes, even though it's got a fiscal note on it.
And I do thank the members of that subcommittee for helping me get to this place. I know that there was a lot of efforts made to get us to this place, so I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to do my best to see if there's any money left in state government for this.
Okay. Got a question called on the bill on House Bill 1001. All those in favor of moving that bill out to Finance, Ways and Means indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
Roll the rest. Okay, members, we're going to take care of Representative Bonds, and then I think we will roll the rest to next week. Some of them are rolled anyway. Item 13, House Bill 1174. Representative Baum, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman White. The state of Tennessee does not provide funding directly for new schools through its BEP funding formula, and yet some of our school districts are growing very rapidly. Some in the state are adding more than 1,000 new students per year. Some are initiating construction of one new school per year. This bill would provide funding from the state of Tennessee through its general fund to LEAs for new schools and other education capital projects. It'd do it through one-time money through a grant process. The grant procedures would be set up by the Department of Education and allocated by them as well. In order to be eligible for these monies, the LEA would need to grow by at least 2% over the prior 5-year period. This would make almost 40 LEAs eligible for this funding. There'd be a $7 million cap. No LEA could receive more than $7 million, but the grants would be awarded from a pool of $30 million.
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you. And Mr. Sponsor, it sounds like a good bill, but I'm curious, are we using any of the federal dollars that have been allocated for school construction in this?
This bill was written before some of that money and those plans were devised. And so at this time, I don't know whether that kind of funding would be eligible, whether federal funding would be eligible to support this or not.
Chairman Reagan.
I would, while I support your concept, I think we need to get a reading from the department or the state board, one or the other, whoever's going to control those funds. I think it's going to be the department, as to how much of those we could apply before we pull any out of our treasury.
You want to respond to that, Chairman Bone?
Maybe I should roll it 1 week to get the answer to that question.
Okay. Without objection, House Bill 1174 is rolled 1 week. And I also understand item number 14, House Bill 1335, you're taking off notice. Chairman Bond?
That's correct.
Off notice. Item House Bill 1335 off notice. That brings us to your last one on the calendar for here, House Bill 1410. Representative Bond, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman White. This bill would enact the Safe Stars Act, which establishes safety and health provisions for our Tennessee student athletes. It would be based on the Tennessee Department of Health's Safe Stars program. This is a program that was developed by physicians and athletic trainers at Vanderbilt University. It's a nationally recognized program. It is considered to be one of the most comprehensive health and safety programs in the country. It's got three levels of requirements: gold, silver, and bronze. The gold level is the one with the highest standards. This bill would just mandate bronze level standards. Many of the provisions of the bronze level are things that we are already mandating in our statutes. But there are some new provisions, but even those new provisions in some cases are already voluntarily being done by our LEAs. Let me give you some examples of what would be required. Coaches would be required to receive annual training regarding concussions, sudden cardiac arrest, CPR, AEDs. Coaches would have to undergo background checks and fingerprinting. The bill would require the LEAs to develop allergic reaction plans for emergencies and severe weather policies. Coaches would receive training on heat illnesses as well as unexpected environmental conditions like lightning. The LEAs would have to develop a code of conduct for their coaches. And the bill would require the LEAs for parents to have a meeting at the beginning of the athletic year for parents that would either be in person or online, in which information about sudden cardiac arrest symptoms and the benefits of EKG testing could be provided to parents, as well as information about heat illnesses and concussions. One of the advantages of this bill is it would put all of these requirements in one place in the code.
Representative Bond, and to get your bill in proper order, I apologize. You did have an amendment on the bill. I'm looking at 5823.
That's correct.
And that does rewrite the bill. Everything you explained is that bill, is that amendment?
That's correct.
Okay, members, let's go ahead and so we can have proper discussion of the bill. All those in favor of adding Amendment 5823 to House Bill 1410 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, we're back on your bill as amended that rewrites and all that discussion or explanation considered was on the amendment. Did you have any more comments on that? And then I'll open it for discussion.
Happy to answer questions.
Questions, comments, Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Baum, how does this affect? I was reading, it affects coaches and volunteers. The one situation I thought where it could get complicated are where schools host rec league, recreational league basketball. I mean, there's a couple in my district that I can think of that have pretty large leagues where you could have, up to 20 coaches every year. So every year when they hold the rec league, what does that training look like and how do they conduct it?
Community-based athletic activities are encouraged to follow these provisions, but they're not required, and that is specifically in the bill, that it's just encouraged for these rec leagues.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Further discussion?
Question on the bill.
Question's been called. Any objection to that question? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving House Bill 1410 out to calendar and rules indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. It moves out. Chairman Reagan,
Motion to adjourn.
any objection to the motion? Without objection, we are adjourned. All the following bills on the calendar will be rolled till next week's calendar.